Hello everyone, welcome to another video from Fantasy Football Scout. Hope you're all doing well. I am joined today by Oscar, FPL_gents on Twitter. How are you, Oscar?
I'm excellent, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Yeah, the new season is only a few days away. And like I was saying to Ted yesterday, team reveals are now sort of actually team reveals rather than kind of, first drafts or second drafts. So I think, this week is really interesting to see how people's teams are evolving in kind of the final stages. Just for anyone who doesn't know, Oscar does videos for us weekly. They're excellent videos. Lots of stats come from the members area. And you should definitely check those out. They're called Scouting for Goals. They get published sort of every Monday, I believe, or Tuesday. They'll be out all of next season. So definitely look into those. Oscar, let's talk a bit about you. So before we get into your team, I've got your rank history on the screen. Apart from your first season, which I believe you started in Gameweek 5 or something like that. So we can kind of ignore that. So 3 seasons since, a top 5k finish, a 17k finish, and a 67k finish. Pretty decent, right?
Yeah, I believe I've had pretty good success, like being so new to the game. But I've also had a long time had a really big interest for football, and I'm a football coach as well. So yeah, if you have that natural interest for the game, it's easy to just get into FPL quite quickly.
So you're an FPL coach, meaning that you're almost like a real world manager and a fantasy manager. You're like Dean Smith's two personalities sort of rolled into one.
Yeah, it's like they say, it's not the same thing doing an FPL team and coaching like younglings, but maybe some interlaps there. Overlaps.
Do you just want to like shake some of the players in your fantasy team and be like, do better, get on the pitch, score some goals. Come on, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can imagine. So what's your kind of strategy with FPL? How would you kind of define yourself? I mean, you've got these kind of different camps of the real differential maverick managers who, maybe look at effective ownership and deliberately go against it so they can bring in someone who no one's got, or you've got the very boring dullard players who pick very sensible players and don't deviate too much from the template. How would you kind of see yourself sitting between those two camps?
I mean, I'm not that exciting as a manager if you were to follow me.
Really build it up, Oscar. It's, make the people want to listen to you. It's good.
yeah. But I'm very data driven, and I've always been interested in bookie odds and trying to combine the assist and goal scoring odds and clean sheet and just look at that every week. And when you do that, it's quite natural to pick quite obvious picks usually. And but of course the eye test is huge, and that's where I think you gain an edge. So I spotted Lingard, for instance, last season, and that was not a data-driven choice by any means. So I think you just have a solid understanding of FPL, and then just have a punt once in a while.
Yeah.
But I think the most important thing is just being ahead of the curve on any player who is good value, and that for me is of course eye test and data driven, but mostly eye test.
So kind of a balance then, right? Probably fairly similar to me. I mean, I tend to use stats to kind of confirm decisions that I'm making. So I watch a game and think, oh, this player is looking really good. Do the stats support the player, or is this just a one-off? Oh, actually the stats are pretty decent. He does take a lot of shots. He is getting the ball in dangerous areas. Yeah, I'll bring him in. And that's kind of how I try and work. I mean, sometimes it flips. Sometimes a player will come out of a stats table and I'll be like, oh my God, this player's stats are incredible. I seriously need to bring this guy in. But mostly I'd say it's eye test first and then stats. Because there's some people that are just purely stats, right? They build models. They completely rely on that. That's never been the way that I like to play.
No, it's not that fun, but it definitely has a place. Like Doherty, when he was amazing, just before he became amazing, there was this guy on Twitter who posted the stats. He didn't have any returns in the first 4 game weeks or so 2 years ago, and then I was like, wow, look at the heat maps and look at the stats, and why not go for him? And I hadn't seen him for 1 minute. So you can't just ignore the stats, I think.
Yeah, and Antonio was a good example as well a few years ago before that game against Norwich. That always seemed to me to be a perfect overlap of just everything coming together for one play. He had the perfect fixture. He was at home. His underlying stats were like off the charts. He looked good whenever I watched him play. And he was just that player who you just got in. But then the key thing is he actually delivered in that game against Norwich, because so often we think we've got the perfect player and then they go off and do absolutely nothing for us. So it's nice when it comes in, makes it feel like we kind of know what we're doing, but it just doesn't happen regularly enough. So just on the template, I mean, I've called this video Template FC. And I think that gives some indication as the team we're going to be talking about of yours. I think the template has a bad reputation, right? Like a lot of teams are the same on Twitter. I think you've touched on the fact that a lot of teams are the same on Twitter because they're the most engaged fantasy managers who do a lot of stats research, a lot of know football really well, know these players, and they gravitate towards good players. So it's no surprise that there exists a Twitter template of, 15, 16 kind of core players who people are picking because they are the best players to consider, right?
Yeah, I mean, I usually want to bounce off some ideas and then I post like, is this combo better or worse? And usually it's like players that I pondered that I'm a bit like, they're not template, but I see a bit of like nice upside and such. For instance, like let's say Gundogan, I think he looked great in the Community Shield. But as soon as I compare him to, if I ask anyone the question, everyone's gonna like have a few other players ahead of him, and then if I ask why, then there's always like reasonable explanations to that. Yeah.
So how much do you find that Twitter influences you in your kind of decision making?
I think it's very big in the preseason. If I was to like look at the drafts I made in at the start when the game launched and how like my changes has like followed the Twitter changes. Like there's this, what do you say, hive mind thinking, but I think it's a positive in most cases. Like as soon as someone comes up with a good stat, then everyone embraces it. And a new like discovered path that I think is good. Like for instance, Ings, I put him straight into my team when he was official, but I needed that preseason game to like verify that he starts or something. He might not start, but I think he does. And where do I get that info from? Well, Twitter is a great source for like people seeing the games, because I don't live in UK, so I don't have all the preseason games. I barely have any access to any preseason games.
Well, a good example of the kind of hive mind that's going on at the moment is around this new this Liverpool left back. So Robertson's injured, so everyone's talking about Tomiskas, who's like the kind of Robertson replacement, 4 million. I hadn't considered him at all. I was just like, he's a 4 million Liverpool defender, but Robertson's going to be back after 3 or 4 weeks. Why would I do that to myself? And then you see lots of teams with him, and I wouldn't say that I've been swayed by the fact he's in. Well, I wouldn't say I've been swayed by this kind of hive mind, but the fact I've seen him in so many teams has made me just think to myself, okay, what are the reasons why people are considering him? Let me just go through the kind of like thought process. And I thought, okay, the biggest negative obviously is you want 3 Liverpool players at one point. You're going to get stuck with Tomiskas, who's probably going to be out of the side. But the upside is we're probably going to be wildcarding before game week 7 anyway. Robertson could be out for 4 weeks. We might get three games out of Tomiskas. Really good pre-season form. Got the assist for Firmino again last night. Liverpool, great fixtures. Let's just tap into that. And I mean, I moved Chilwell down to Tomiskas, so saved 2 million. And the things I can do with that and the rest of the team are really, really nice. So it is a short-term move, but at the same time, it's one that can probably benefit you in the long run overall, because you can, there's going to be other players that emerge. I can leave some money in the bank and upgrade Tomiskas to a 4-5 playing defender a bit later down the line, or I can just leave him. I can just leave him there if I don't want to get the 3 Liverpool. So, yeah, I think Tomiskas is a good example of a player who is in almost everyone's draft now. I hadn't considered, but I only considered because of Twitter.
Yeah, and I think a reason for that also is like people are exaggerating everything when it's new. Like, look at this guy
Yeah.
to like, yeah, it's also to bring some discussion and a little bit clickbaity too. So I
Oh,
don't
I
think,
wouldn't know anything about that, Oscar.
oh, okay. Oh, what's that? But yeah, so I think he's a great pick, but let's every time I see that like fixture run, I think that you should go for the attackers rather than the defenses. Like they're not that great at keeping clean sheets, haven't been for a long time. So you're hoping for assists, and yeah, I haven't seen a lot of him to like justify that for now. But at the same time, he costs 4 million. If
Yeah.
you look at my team structure, I can just swap him for Amarte and then switch Jota to Greenwood.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Jota is like the most underpriced guy in the game, according to me, if he gets like 70 minutes, but I'm not even sure of that. So it's definitely, I think that's part of why people are going for that Tsimikas, or I'm
I
not
think that's
sure.
definitely a better pronunciation than me. Well, let's come on to your team. Let's not waste any more time. So I'll read
Yep.
your team out for anyone listening. You've got, it's very template. Just so everyone's aware, it's very template, very Twitter template. Sanchez in goal, Trent, Veltman, and Shaw. So double Brighton defense at the back. You got Salah, you got Jota, you got Fernandes and Barnes. Then you've got Antonio, Ings, and Tony. And on your bench, you've got Foster, Amity, Eiling, and Brownhill. So I would say this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's about 11 out of 15 of what I would consider the kind of the main Twitter template. So you've got a couple of different differentials there. You've got Jota in there, you've got Barnes in there. I'd say, those are Veltman, the double Brighton defence, probably not too many have, but other than that, it's pretty template, right? And you know that, and you're owning it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've been trying to like pick players that aren't as template, but what it comes down to is like my previous experience of them. Like Mahrez, for instance, I've never had one good game
Oh,
week
thank God,
owning
someone else
Mahrez.
is saying it. I know, he's a
So
nightmare,
I have,
that guy.
yeah, so I have to go on that previous experience to an extent. Like I think Gundogan is a better pick value wise, for instance. Yeah, should I go like
Yeah,
position?
let's start at the back then. So you've got Sanchez in goal. Obviously he's kind of the most popular goalkeeper that we're seeing for 4.5 million. I see a few teams with Martinez in. I see a couple of teams with Foster and Backman combo, but I think the majority are backing Brighton in kind of the early stages. You've gone for the double up though, so you've got Veltman in there as well. It was something that I was kind of considering, but the defensive double up has never historically worked out for me. What's your thinking there?
My thinking is rotating with Ailing because yeah, they have a nice rotation kind of thing going on, and as well as having a like nailed 4.5 player on the bench every game week in case something like messes up. I think that's pretty good balance. And of course, Amarte also rotates nicely in case he plays.
Yeah, what do you think about him? Do you think he keeps his place, or do you think Rodgers invests in another centre back?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a Leicester supporter or know a lot about them, but I heard that he was great in the
Yeah, he was. Played really well.
Shield, and that kind of performance against a big team usually gives the manager a tough choice at least.
Yeah, I mean they're in an interesting position with centre back because they've got a kind of a strong three centre backs, right? They've got Soyuncu, they've got Fofana, and they've got Evans. So I don't know if Rodgers is going to want to go out and spend 50, 60 million that it would cost to get another kind of elite centre back who probably isn't going to break up that front three. So I reckon he's probably quite happy with Amity being that kind of backup. I think they're going to have to get another centre back of some description, but I'm not convinced that it's going to be another, a kind of an elite player. So I think they could bring in another backup, and that would be kind of the rotation with Amity. But I think the performance was so strong for me in that Community Shield. I mean, no one could get past him. He was absolutely brilliant. So I think, particularly for the first couple of game weeks, I think he's pretty set that he's going to play in that team. And, if he plays well in those, there's no reason why he couldn't potentially keep his place longer term. So, yeah, I'm a fan. You got Trent in there, so you're not tempted. I mean, the thing that's confusing me is people downgrading Trent to Misgas. I think, you've got Salah and Jota and Trent. So you've got, a really strong 3 Liverpool players. I think when you're downgrading Trent to Misgas, I think I draw the line there. Trent, to me, is boosted even more by Robertson being out, because he should take more set pieces, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. Robertson took like half of the corners last season. I didn't even consider that. And I'm not saying that Trent is a better option when Robbo is gone. I think it's the other way around. But like, you hate your life when Arnold scores like 12 points, and he does it so effortlessly. Yeah. I mean, he had a bad season last time. I think he scored like almost 160 points. So you need some like safe players, I think, in your game week 1 team if you want to look at like medium term, potentially like saving the wild card for a little bit longer. Then you need to have a little bit of solid foundation.
Yeah. And that tends to be how game week 1 pans out. You need that kind of spine, and then sprinkling a couple of differentials around that. And that tends to be the way to go. I always go too far the other way. I normally start with a spine, and then sort of a few hours before the deadline, I make a load of changes, and it just never pays off. I always try and be a bit too different, and I'm really trying this year to stick with tried and tested players and have a couple of players in who are a little bit risky, but not that risky. So I think Barnes is a perfect example of a player like that. He's a player that I've been really impressed with pre-season. Was really impressed with him before his injury last year. I think he's a little bit of a risk because he's coming off the back of quite a big injury. But I'm happy to take that risk because I think the fixtures are good and he looks like their kind of main threat. Just to go back to defence quickly, you've got Shaw in there. So you haven't got Dean. So whenever I see a team without Dean, I think this is someone who's not gone completely template. I mean, Trent, Shaw and Dean is just overwhelmingly the favourite in the back 3. What are your feelings on Shaw? You just think he's too good to ignore?
Yeah, I think they priced him wrong. Like, they have centre backs that cost the same in that team. I'm not sure what Wan-Bissaka cost. I guess the same.
He's 5.5, yes, and Maguire is too. You'd think Shaw would be one bracket up, right, up to the 6.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think I would consider him at 6.5 maybe.
Wow.
I would consider him because I think Manchester United will improve defensively with Varane coming in, and yeah, Shaw was such a hero for me too in my bench boost last year. He got 12 points on my bench, facing like difficult opposition. So he's earned that place for mine.
I think that's more than my entire bench boost got last season, just for sure. And it never goes well for me, that chip. Yeah, Shaw, I have to be honest, I was saying this to Ted, Shaw, I haven't had him in a single draft. And it's not because I don't think he's a good option. It's just because I just find that 5-5 bracket to be a bit meh. Like Dean and Shaw are in so many teams. And I like Chilwell and Cancelo up at 6. A bit more. I just think you've got a bit more flexibility if you go for those as well, because you can move over to Van Dijk if you wanted to, for example. But actually, I've now dropped down to Miscas and a 4-5 just to put in a bit of money into my attacking options. But I can see why Shaw is so popular, and especially with the fixtures as well. I mean, Southampton, in game week 2, it's going to be a nightmare to watch that without owning him, and he's owned by like 50% of the game. So
I think the value is going to be a little bit cheaper defenders this year. So maybe Soufal and Dunk could be people that you downgrade if you sell Shaw. I think James is the same price as Shaw.
He is, yep.
So I think there's enough options like to not worry about that he's in a little bit of an awkward price bracket maybe.
I think we see this every season. I think we always see people at the start starting with quite a lot of money in their defence. So to me, Trent, Dean and Shaw, and then a 4-5 bench option, and then sort of Amity, that's quite an expensive defence, I think. That's a more expensive defence than we'll have later on in the season when we're trying to free up money to put money into different positions. And, at the moment, we're only talking about Fernandes and Salah really as the premium options. I know a few people are mentioning sort of Mane. Kane's obviously going to come into it. Lukaku's going to be around. But I think we're going to want money to put into our forward line at some point and our midfielders, and that's going to come out of defence. So why not start with a more kind of cheaper defence, which is what I'm looking at, rather than going really heavy. So I think your defence is more kind of sensible in a way, and I think you're right. You could downgrade Shaw to Soufal a bit later on and save 0.5 and move it in, but yeah, it's not a particularly expensive backline, which I like. So midfield, you've got Salah, you've got Jota, you've got Fernandes, and you've got Barnes. So let's talk about the Liverpool double up first of all. Jota, you mentioned him. You think he's the most underpriced asset in the game. Why do you think that?
I think he's a premium in disguise. Like whenever he plays, he has like similar output to Salah and Mane. So obviously it's just a question of, does he get enough minutes? And I'm not sure if he does, like medium term, maybe short term. I'm still a little bit hesitant on him, but if he plays, I'm expecting points from him.
He could be 9 million, couldn't he? You wouldn't be surprised if he was 9 million. I guess the thing that doesn't go into his favour is, what is his place in the team? Is he actually a first team player, or is it still a Firmino, Salah and Mane, trio up front that Klopp still likes? I think Wijnaldum leaving frees up a bit more room for Jota to play. It doesn't look like they've signed a replacement. Not sure if they're going to. They need to sign some attacking talent, in my view, because Salah and Mane are going to go off to the African Cup of Nations. What are they going to do then? Who have they got? They're going to be bringing in like Minamino and it's going to be, yeah. I think Liverpool could I say struggle. I'd say struggle to mount a title challenge. I think top 4 obviously is going to be the aim for them, but I think they're going to be a bit light. But I'm expecting a big season from Jota. The stats are amazing, really encouraging stats at the end of last season, despite not getting many points. Really encouraging stats in the Euros, despite Portugal not doing that well, and him not scoring either. But yeah, I do really like him. 7.5 is very tempting, I have to say, right?
Yeah, are you close to getting him in?
Yeah. I mean, at the moment, I've got Salah, Trent, and Tomiskas, and I guess that's the argument you mentioned earlier with Tomiskas. Is it block shoot from that Jota move? So if you go with Tomiskas and Jota gets a brace against Norwich, and then he's going into Burnley at home, and you've got Tomiskas, Trent, and Salah, how do you get Jota in? You're going to have to take a -4, right? If you want him, because the prices are going to go up. He's probably the player that I'm most worried about. Not owning at the start, because I think if he does well against Norwich, which he could easily do, I think he could go up 0.2 quickly. And we know with price change at the start of the season, it's hard to jump on them if they're going up to a different price bracket. Because if you've got a 7 or a 7.5 midfielder there, and he's 7.7, how do you get him? You're gonna have to take a hit. So yeah, I'm worried about him. The player that I have got at 7 million is Barnes, like you. Wolves at home in the first game, really impressive in the Community Shield. Scored a great goal in pre-season as well, where Leicester broke from a corner and just got the ball to him, and he's ran down the pitch and just slotted it in, full of confidence. I think he's really going to suit this Wolves game as well, because they're going to attack.
Yeah, I mean, the Wolves game is, of course, decent. Leicester are favorites, but it's a little bit like middle term or longer term for me to pick Barnes. And I also like that price bracket. There's a lot of interesting options. It could be downgraded to like the more popular Rafinha, Buendia when he's more nailed, and a couple of 6 million players too. So I think there's definitely a good price bracket to have someone in. And it could also be like Greenwood or Gundogan. Yeah,
I mean it's a template team you've got, but I think that the price structure you've got is really nice. Like I said, you've freed up a little bit of money in defence, going for Veltman over Dean, so you've saved $1 million there, for example. You've got a 7.5 option, a 7 million option in midfield, so you can move to these kind of slightly cheaper players if you want. But also, you could move Barnes down to Buendia, for example, and Jota up to Grealish if you wanted to, or something like that. You've got options of how to move, which I really like. Is making sure you hit certain price points a kind of a strategy of yours when you're building like a Gameweek 1 team?
Yeah, that's huge for me, and trying to figure out like the fixture swings, but not committing too much to possible transfers going forward. Like you should be able to just stick with this player for a while, in my opinion, too. And maybe that speaks against Jota, but I think Barnes he's going to start almost every game. And I looked at his stats before his injury last season, and he had returns in 8 of his 11 matches before the injury, last matches, and averaged 7 points in those 11 games. And he was like on his way towards a 200 point season.
Yeah.
And he's also like lovely to watch because he's so direct and he's always involved in front of goal. I love his positioning. The only thing that he can improve for sure is the finishing, but he still scored 9 goals. So I just see him improving in that area too.
I think he's just improving every year, isn't he? I think last year, I think that even the year before last, we saw some signs. I think he was recalled from a loan where he was doing really well and he made the step up to the Premier League. Last year, we saw massive signs of improvement curtailed by the injury. And this year, I mean, all this talk about Iheanacho and players, but I think Barnes is almost going to kind of keep Iheanacho out the team because I think Rodgers has kind of earmarked Barnes as being the main danger man. Vardy's getting on a bit. We've seen Maddison dropping a bit deeper again, despite him saying that he wants to get more goals. And I think he drops deep to let Barnes push on and sort of break the offside trap and be the direct player running through on goal. I think he's absolutely brilliant. I really do. I think 7 million is a steal for him. And Leicester start strong. They start strong every year. Got good fixtures. Yeah, really like him. Okay, so the last player in your midfield is Bruno. So Bruno, I think people are a week ago. It was 50-50, right, on Twitter. I think we saw lots of teams without him. We've seen, another set of teams with him. I've always had him in my side. I think we're now starting to see a bit of a change back to most people having him back in their teams. Has he ever left your side?
Yeah, most drafts in the beginning stages was without Bruno and just trying to see what I could do without him. Obviously, I did some research, which I posted on the Scout channel, like different opposition and how well people or the premiums does versus them. And it was clear that Bruno fancies these mid-table teams because they don't sit back too much. And versus the best teams, they're always going to be hard to score against. So I just look at this fixture run and think this is like prime Bruno time, and it's not much to like overthink. I think his fixtures are just too good.
Yeah, and I mean the other premium that you could be considering there is Mane, but you've got Jota to kind of cover that, who's like 5 million less. It just seems the Mane pricing to me is a real oversight on FPL's part. I think I've done some videos with Josh for Fan Team, for example, and he's priced at 10 million on that, and I think that's nice because you've got the 7.5 Jota, you've got Mane at 10, and then you've got Salah at 12.5. So you've got it really is a decision to make. Do you bank the extra cash or do you go for it? I just think with Jota there, I just don't know why you'd go for Mane. It just seems too much money to spend for me. So up front you got pretty template, same 3 as me, Antonio, Ings and Tony. Let's talk about Tony first. I mean, I look at this team and I think come the end of the season when you're reviewing your game week 1 team, I reckon you'll look back at all these players and say, yeah, I can see why I went for these. Tony's the one player who I think he could do well, could get 10 goals and Brentford stay up and everyone's like, oh, what a great option. But he could be the guy who at the end of the season goes, oh God, do you remember when we all started with Ivan Toney and he got like no goals in 8 matches and he was absolutely rubbish? What do you think about his prospects?
I think he's deserves to be at least 7 million, maybe 7.5.
Right.
So yeah, that's why I think
a big claim.
Everyone has this
big claim for a newly promoted striker.
Yeah, maybe, but he's their like only outlet forward from my understanding, just like Pukki is, and that's why I think Pukki is a good shout too if you need like a 6 million player. I don't have that much to say regarding Tony. I mean, he's on set pieces. He's quite lethal. Like he strikes the ball well. He seems to move well. He seems hungry. And if he just keeps the same level, then I think he's going to be value. And maybe they have made some new signings. I don't know. Maybe there's like even better creative support behind him. I don't know.
Not really. They
No?
haven't strengthened too much. They're kind of keeping faith with a lot of the players that took them up. I mean, Norwich, for example, you could argue have got weaker with losing Buendia. They have brought Billy Gilmore in. Watford as well haven't made too many notable signings. It's I think apart from the top sides, there isn't a lot of money being splashed around. Villa obviously being the exception to that. But like Brighton, for example, like we haven't really signed anyone. Southampton have lost Ings and haven't really strengthened. There looks like they're going to get Armstrong from Blackburn, a Championship striker to fill that void. But it's the transfer market is still in a bit of a strange place. I think with transfer fees ridiculously high. When Ben White's going for £50 million, it truly is a kind of a crazy market. I think Tony's a great option at the start. I do think eventually teams will learn to stop the supply to him, and I do wonder how many chances he's going to get. He's not going to have as many shots on target as he had in the Championship. I don't think Brentford are going to be as gung-ho as they were in that either. I think they're going to have to be a bit more defensive. So I really like him for the opening weeks though, and I think we might see something like we saw with Pukki a few seasons ago where he regresses a little bit. But for 6'5", the focal point for quite an attacking team, I'm starting him. I'm keeping him. Yeah. I think you're quite brave actually to not go with him if you haven't gone for him. But I think most are.
Yeah, he could definitely be even bigger of a bandwagon at the start of the season. And I think like people underestimate a little bit the forwards in that price bracket. Like I'm really keen on Rodrigo as well, for instance. I think Wood is always a little bit overlooked. Like he's pretty fairly priced, but he's a good option.
Yep.
What else is there?
Well,
I know there are some.
Yeah, I mean, you've got potentially Edouard coming over from Celtic to Brighton or Southampton. There's quite a few rumours for him. He'd probably come in about 6'5". Abraham's unfortunately off to Roma. It looks like he would have been a great option. I think you got like Mopay and Welbeck. You've got João Pedro at 6. You've got Pukki, who you mentioned. So yeah, there's quite a few options that we can consider. I don't think it's a case of Tony doesn't deliver and we've got nowhere to go. I think like you mentioned, we can find 0.5 and go up to Wood. We could find $1 million and go up to someone like Callum Wilson, or we can go down to one of these other promoted strikers who might be performing. So yeah, I quite like it as well. I am gutted about Abraham though. I really thought Abraham could go to if he went to Arsenal, for example, for 35 million, I think he'd have been a great 6.5 option. I mean, I wish he'd come to Brighton. I wish he would sign anyone. So hopefully we'll get Edouard. But yeah, we'll kind of see. You got Ings in there as well. So I'm guessing you had Watkins and you switched to Ings when he signed. How many goals do you reckon Ings is going to get this season?
First of all, no, I haven't had Watkins.
You've not had Watkins?
Any draft.
Interesting.
No, I haven't. There's like I think there are more exciting options than Watkins. I think he's very consistent, but
14 goals, 9 assists.
Yeah, he's very consistent, but I had him a lot last season and he didn't quite like deliver when I wanted him to. He delivered as soon as I sold him, which means like in the little bit tougher fixtures. So he's a little bit more like fixture proof than what I prefer, like more predictable. So anyway, Ings, I think he's a bit hyped up, to be fair. Like he's going to be okay, but Aston Villa have like a lot of new players, so it's hard to know how they will look basically, and how will they shape up. At the same time, Ings is like two seasons ago. That's the Ings I hope is going to appear here. I think it's going to be a mix between that Ings and the Ings from last season, which was a little bit disappointing, but still like ticked along. So basically it's playing the fixtures most of all, and he's in a nice price bracket, can be switched to Calvert-Lewin or Bamford, for instance.
Did you have Ings 2 seasons ago when he was doing so well?
I was very late on getting him in. It was like hard to understand him a little bit because he was so clinical. and it was like hard to see it last, but it did last.
Yeah, I was on it right from the start.
Nice.
It was beautiful. It's one of the, when I think back to FPL and in my whole time playing it, I think jumping on Ings on that time was one of my greatest one of my greatest moves, because it was just, yeah, so consistent. And I think he's got it in him. I think he's got it in him to do it again. I mean, this is a big move for him, a £30 million move to a very kind of aspirational team who want to be, they want to be Champions League, players. I think the owners come out and said they want to win the league at some point. So, the investment has been massive. He's got all these kind of creative players behind him. It's just the fitness, isn't it? And whenever we talk about Ings, we can't help but say, can he stay fit for more than 6-7 months? And it's the same with Antonio, who's your other striker. He's the only striker at West Ham currently. I cannot believe that we're like 3 days away from the beginning of the season, and they're going to go into the first week with only one striker. I would have bet any money on them signing someone, because it just seems crazy, right? Antonio is bound to get injured at some point. What do they do then?
Yeah, that's a big question. I don't know, because Antonio to me isn't even like, of course he's striker material, but he seems a little bit more flexible than that. Like he can play a little bit like Watkins. He can play anywhere in the top three, and he will be good, but he's not like a natural striker in my opinion. So that makes it even weirder that they rely so much on him.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I thought Abraham would have been the kind of the perfect player for them, and I'm sure there would have been some kind of inquiries. I guess maybe Chelsea are reluctant to sell to West Ham, who are, I mean, closing the gap might be a bit of a stretch, but you know what I mean. They're top 6 side now. Maybe if West Ham had finished sort of bottom half of the table, they might have been a bit more open. But yeah, I'm still convinced they're gonna sign someone. I mean, they had Haller, didn't they? And he was a different option, so a big, tall, good header of the ball. Sold him. I thought that was the kind of striker they might try and bring in to give them a bit of a plan B. But yeah, it looks like they're keeping faith with Antonio. I think Bowen can play up there as well. Maybe they see Ben Rama as well as someone who could operate in that position. So maybe they've got more options than I think, but I'm sure they're going to sign another striker. And with Europe starting as well, it's a bit of a risk. But I think most teams have got Antonio, and the fixtures are really good early on. And you're a big stats man, and for one, Antonio's stats are great, right? Always.
Yeah, he has good underlying stats, and I think he's just consistent. He's a safe pick, as I said, except from the probably more injury prone than most players in this squad. If we're looking at like a couple of weeks down the line, though, I think Ings is like a natural transfer out just because of the fixture swing. So I have to rely a little bit on Antonio being fit to a degree, actually, and that makes me a little bit like less like him maybe. But there are like Wilson is a really great option. I think you could start with if you know about his fitness. I think there was like some doubts regarding his fitness.
There's always doubts about Wilson's fitness. He's in the same bracket as Antonio and Ings, right? These are the kind of the 3 mid-price strikers that pretty much everyone's kind of considering, and they're 3 players who any minute could get injured. I mean, just looking at your subs bench, so you've got Amity, Eiling, and Brownhill. So you've got Eiling and Brownhill are 2 kind of like decentish subs. Amity, I think, is good for at least the first few weeks, and we'll kind of see what happens there. But I mean, I think the thing with your team is you've got Barnes, Antonio, and Ings, who, Barnes has had the injury, might have his minutes managed a little bit. Antonio and Ings who are injured. You got Jota as well. We're not sure what's going to happen with him. He could miss a game. It wouldn't be totally surprising. Do you think your bench is strong enough to kind of cater for that? Are you a little bit worried, or are you just going to kind of ride that out and hope for the best?
I mean, it's hard to say that like Barnes is injury prone or that he's going to be eased in. I've also seen like the other way around, that people are like, stay fit and all of the season after like having a pretty crucial injury seemingly. So I'm not like Barnes isn't in that kind of thinking for me, but the rest of them are. Like when you put it like that, maybe there are too many like injury prone players.
Oh no, don't get influenced. But this is what happened with Ted. I made Ted change his subs just because I said about that. It's
but it's hard because you want this.
Of course.
The 7 million players, because if they bang, then they're unusually good value. That doesn't happen to like Salah and Fernandes. They just have this consistent high often. So it's like really tempting to go for them. And I think that there are better midfield options in the game in terms of like quantity. Let's say Greenwood.
Well, I was going to
Gundogan,
mention Greenwood. Greenwood's exactly who I was going to come to next. What do you think about Greenwood sort of early on?
I really like him as a game week 1 player. Yeah, I'm very close to getting him in instead of Jota.
Are you? Interesting.
Yeah. I think that's a very close call. I think Jota is marginally better, but at the same time, if you switch around to that cheap Greek defender, then Greenwood is the natural placement for me, just ahead of Gundogan, and it's mainly due to fixtures, because obviously Greenwood is a little bit of a rotation risk as well. But he's been performing well.
Yeah, he has. And I can't work out whether Sancho signing makes Greenwood a better option or a worse one, because I think obviously he's now probably not going to play on the right, but I think Solskjaer sees him as a striker anyway. And so I think it's going to be between him and Cavani leading the line. I think Cavani's going to be more of an impact player, or maybe start some of the bigger matches. But I think in United's early run, I think we can expect to see Greenwood playing up top. And if you've then got a 7.5 million United player playing up top with, Fernandes, Sancho, and these guys behind him, he's someone that could easily become a bandwagon early on. So again, it's another reason why I think Jota and having that 7.5 million option is good, because I think you're right. I think it's a 50-50 call between both of them.
Yeah, I think triple Liverpool is very, very much a must right now, with that nailed 4 million defender. One of him or Jota, in my opinion, is
I love that you're not even trying to pronounce his name. You're just dodging it. That Greek defender, 4 million.
Yeah. Tsimikas, I think he's called, but I've heard others say different, so I get unsure of it.
I don't think anyone else. I don't think anyone's going to know until the Liverpool game when the commentator pronounces it. To be honest.
Yeah, they're pretty hung up on getting it right.
Yeah, I imagine they're just reading it to themselves over and over again to try and get it right. Oscar, that's brilliant. Thank you so much. I like this team. It's very hard to argue against any of the picks in it. I think it's gonna get off to a strong start, unless you make loads of changes based on what we've been talking about today and ruin it, and you go for Greenwood and Jota bangs a hat trick. You'll be cursing me. Just to give a shout out to the Fantasy Football Scout members area. Obviously, just 3 days left until the end of the season. No, to the start of the season. God, I can't be thinking at the end of the season yet. If you haven't registered with the site, it's a good time to do it now. We've got members articles coming. We've got members videos. We've got the new transfer planner. Got things like Rate My Team to see how the algorithm predicts that your team's going to do over the first sort of 8 weeks. Player comparisons, heat maps, stats tables. You know all about this, Oscar. You do videos on it.
Yeah, it's very nice.
Very nice. Yeah.
I recommend it. Yeah.
He's not even just saying that. And obviously check Oscar's Scouting for Goals videos out when the season begins. And thank you so much for watching. And Oscar, I will speak to you soon.
Yeah. See you.
Cheers,
Take
guys.
care.